Are you aware there's apparently a war on in some desert someplace?
I had heard.
Yeah, I've been informed. I was on holiday when it decided to happen, and then my controversial take on this that is going to affect absolutely everything, considering people keep asking me, is I don't think babies that have nothing to do with it should be blown up. Thanks for the TED talk. That's a really impactful thing that I can put on a placard. Don't I feel good?
I hadn't thought of it like that, but now you say it,
Yeah.
I think I'm inclined to agree, actually.
Yes, I know. It's a really contentious take. Overall, frankly, I don't care about the long-standing conflict that both of these religions that I neither ascribe to have. I don't want to pay for it. I just don't want innocent civilians on either side getting killed. But my opinion in that influences nothing. I also don't want people who seem to be very motivated on either side, particularly the side that's really happy about a bunch of innocent people being massacred at a concert, marching through my city streets when they should have no right to be here. Unfortunately, the immigration policies of our elites that have been conducted since before I was born have brought this issue to our shores. And so I'm going to go through a bunch of videos that I've been seeing on Twitter recently over the last couple of weekends that show a lot of people very invested in the conquest of a terrorist state of some region in the Middle East and hopefully the creation of a global caliphate, celebrating it in my home city.
And when you say lots of people slaughtered at a concert, you're talking about the Manchester Arena bombings?
Oh, no, we couldn't mention that. We can't look back in anger, Dan.
Oh, right, yeah. It's because I
You
noticed.
can't retaliate on that one.
Because that one, we had to hold up candles saying don't look back in anger. But
Yeah.
the other one, for whatever reason, there's allowed to be a
that
comeback.
one in particular, the British security state had all sorts of psyops going on and ready to go in the background for
Yes.
when it inevitably did happen, because they were already aware that they knew it was going to happen eventually, something like that, because our own state despises us and wants us dead.
If only the security thinking that went into stopping it in the first place was as good as making us forget it after it has already happened.
That would be fantastic. But then again, if you recognise that it's a problem, you wouldn't be able to manufacture consent for the immigration policy that is slowly grinding down Britain into multicultural sludge and makes us easier to control, which I find quite intolerable.
I also think it's important to remember as we go through this that a lot of the people who are out in the streets that we'll be looking at in a moment celebrating this and protesting in favor of Palestinians are not themselves Palestinian and are from countries who have outright stated that no, we will not be taking any Palestinian refugees if Israel does just decide to pave over all of the West Bank.
Yeah, so there's a twofold on that one. One, lots of them are actually the children of first-generation immigrants, so they're kind of LARPing. Two, lots of them are committed to the global Ummah, which is essentially the international Muslim race as they would conceptualize it, even though various factions and nationalities of Muslims don't like each other, like the Jordanians and the Egyptians won't take in any Palestinian refugees because they know the kind of
Despite the Jordanians probably being the closest to having any sort of claim that they should take them in.
Well, that's a three-state solution, isn't it? Egypt gets Gaza and Jordan gets the West Bank, and both Jordan and Egypt are like, no way. There's no way we're taking them.
Well, I think the people who are protesting for this right now in the West are mainly, one, doing it for ethnic solidarity reasons, and two, doing it because they know that whether or not they're coming from a country that their own countries wouldn't take in, say like the Egyptians and the Jordanians and other people in this country, they know that a massive influx of Palestinian Muslims gives them an even greater share of power in these countries, because that's an even larger voting bloc. That's more people from Islamic territories that can join in part of their ethnic enclave.
Oh yeah, and that's definitely one of the two remaining motivations I was going to mention. One, pure political expediency. I mean, even Marx, a couple of hundred years ago, recognized Islam was a great vanguard revolutionary force to destabilize a culture, to make it easily capturable by his brand of socialism.
Quiet part out loud.
Yeah, essentially so. And also the sort of self-flagellating white guilt of they're brown, so they must be good from various leftists. And there is also a genuine anti-Semitism angle, because some of them do just want to hate and kill Jews.
20 pictures that will make white liberals go, OMG, let's throw away civilization.
Yes, have you considered we can't have borders because I am crying? Anyway, speaking of things that we can't tolerate, if you'd like to subscribe to the website for as little as £5 a month, you'll get content like this, which is Josh's Contemplations series, which in this episode, he and Stelios explain Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance and how it is exploited for things like repressive tolerance by Herbert Marcuse. And go and investigate that in your own time. But here, on the topic of things that I can't stand, let's open with, there was a giant call to prayer ceremony held outside Downing Street. Now, bear in mind, in this country, which has an official established church, the Anglican Church, we currently are arresting Christians for silently praying in their head on the wrong street corner if they're in the proximity of an abortion buffer zone. But you can, after 203 people from varying countries, including the UK, have been abducted by Hamas, after women have been raped, after people have been blown up, after people have been murdered at a pop concert, you can go out in response to that and say, Allahu Akbar, I guess.
I can just say, thank God there wasn't a truck of peace on that street.
Yes, well, obviously, we wouldn't wish violence on any of these men, but as we'll see, lots of the words they're using are wishing violence on us. I just want to demonstrate that straight outside the Hall of Power, we have a genuflection to a foreign culture while also arresting people that are practicing our own national religion. The current Conservative government is not your friend because they are allowing this to happen literally here on their doorstep. But all right then. So then flash forward to this past weekend. So we've had about 100,000 people descending on London. There are also other protests in Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Salford, Dublin, Cardiff, the epicenters of multiculturalism where diversity is definitely the strength. They came to protest what exactly? Hamas not killing more? Because there is an undercurrent here that, again, even if you have legitimate criticisms of Israel, I don't want to be giving foreign aid to any country. I don't love Israel any more than I love India or Canada, for example. But part of the problem here is that this is in direct response to a bunch of innocent civilians getting butchered. So you can just imply that they're saying they deserved it.
Well, in answer to your question, why are they doing it? I think the what you said, the sentence before that was, a show of strength. This is all a show of strength. It is, we are believers. Look at how powerful and how many of us there are.
The media collusion in this as well it pisses me off, right? Okay. No, sorry, Connor. Do you mind if?
Do you want to go back to the title? Is that what you were going to bring up?
Just go back.
I was going to mention
the absolute disgusting lies being spread here by just framing it as Brits March for Palestine.
Average British man.
Brits March for Palestine.
No, but foreigners that hate us. Let's call it what it is. They believe in a foreign ideology that is antithetical to the tradition and religion of England, and even if they are second-generation immigrants, they would clearly be happier somewhere else because they're calling for an Islamic republic. I suggest we give them what they want, not by bringing it here, but by permanently deporting them elsewhere, because that is the only way you bring a peaceful resolution, which we all want, to this particular conflict, because they don't want peace, they want violence, and they're literally calling for it. And I just wanted to include this particular article because the Daily Mail does some good on the ground stuff where they just compile a bunch of images from. Look at the amount of people turning out for this. No, I would just like to say you didn't see the outrage here from people of this ethnicity when there were reports about the grooming gangs and they came out and said, "Oh, don't characterize all of us as this." This wasn't happening. There wasn't a show of solidarity for all the white girls being raped by Pakistani men.
Yeah, but there was a solidarity and ethnic solidarity of silence.
Yes.
Because there's two ways to show ethnic solidarity. One, which is to go out publicly and protest in favor of all of the people that you associate yourself with. And there's closing ranks and keeping quiet about wrongs that people that you are associated with within your within your religious or ethnic group. When they've done something wrong, you stay silent about it. You shut your mouth because you know that can reflect badly on you. With this, they know that they have complete collusion with the media class and with the political class to get away with this. Because if you had any sort of similar protests going on, say, for instance, British groups decided to come out and protest in these kinds of numbers what goes on in Zimbabwe and what happens to the white populations of South Africa, the police wouldn't just crack that down. You would have riot police, you would have the special forces come out waving guns at these people because it would be classified as an act of nationalist terror. It would be classified as an act of white supremacist, white nationalist terror because we are not allowed to show ethnic solidarity. We are not allowed to have ethnic preference. We are only allowed to have out-group preference.
And not just that,
disgusts me.
The conspiracy of silence is mandated from the top because when you said shut their mouths, remember, Naz Shah, who after she retweeted an Owen Jones parody account saying that the women and girls who had been raped by Pakistani Muslims in cities like Manchester had to shut their mouths for the sake of diversity. After she had shared that, she didn't face discipline. She was appointed head of community cohesion by the Labour Party. This is sanctioned by the regime. So it is fine for native British girls to be abused by immigrants, but as soon as the immigrants
blown up.
Yes, as soon as the immigrants come and march in the street for other people getting blown up overseas, then the police take a very light touch, and actually, as we'll see, an even heavier-handed touch to the people that showed up and went, bit far, lads. Yeah, I know. I was going to mention that as well.
So no pride in apartheid,
T plus for a free Palestine.
Also, I mean,
Yes.
no pride in Palestine either. These people might be shocked to discover.
Yeah, this is just a sign saying lambs for slaughter.
Well, in Gaza, they do have a sort of gravity-assisted transition program for the T's, at least.
Oh, wait, it's in the Salford Keys as well. I went to university right here. This is the Media City.
That's where the BBC in the background.
Keys. Yeah,
it's a BBC building.
Some people I went to university with probably worked there and were probably in this crowd.
Well, yeah, I'd imagine a decent number of those people are administrators or
retarded
employees at one of those two buildings.
Future producers who will not be calling Hamas terrorists, as is the editorial mandate over at the BBC. Actually, I'm glad you brought the LGBT thing. I'm going to skip ahead one link and go back to it because someone decided to show up showing intersectional solidarity at the Trafalgar Square protest in London with an LGBT sign. And one diversity took the sign, the Progress Pride flag, and as you can see here, he nicks it off them and decides to run around and trample on it on the street. As Lois said, friend of the show, admiration isn't always mutual. Turns out they're not on board with the current.
I'd say the only foreign aid that I would be in favour was if we took our foreign aid budget and every time somebody waved a flag, which was like LGBTQ for Palestine, is that we immediately flew them out to Gaza and gave them a flag and said, right, go give that a wave, see what happens.
I couldn't endorse violence in that, Dan, but of course, because I actually recognise what goes on in Gaza, unlike these people.
Well, you saying that implies that there would be some kind of guaranteed violence committed to that person for doing such a thing, and I thought that Palestine and other parts of the Middle East are better than that.
This is what at least the protesters are trying to tell us, but
this is so sad. This is the capital of our country.
It's on Nelson's column.
Yes, and what we see here is a huge horde of people committed to
foreign barbarians.
Foreign barbarians, yeah. Basically putting on a show of force on our central landmark
and desecrating it as well. I mean, they've decided to spray graffiti, leave litter everywhere. As TPU guys document, go give them a follow. They're fantastic in doing this stuff. Absolute gentlemen. And they literally graffiti Nelson's column. Symbol of British victory, all of our heritage. No, free Palestine, just graffitied on it after you're standing on it and throwing stuff all over it. And speaking of our capital city, that Sadiq Khan has made excellent. TfL, which I have to brave every day. There was a tube driver who actually led a chant of free Palestine over the tannoy on the tube. He's been since referred to the British Transport Police. I don't expect he'll lose his job, going to be honest. I mean, maybe it's
difficult for a tube driver to lose their job. They've got a very strong union.
Yeah. Again, why is there a population that exists to pack tubes out that you wish to placate for this kind of sentiment?
Do you mind if I play some of the audio?
Yeah, sure, please.
Everyone cheering.
Have a good day.
Yes. Yeah, of course. Well, as you said, there's a show of ethnic solidarity on display within this tube carriage. It doesn't matter about the character of Hezbollah and Hamas. It matters about, are we the same color and are we the same religion, and are they furthering the same goal?
Well, there's one thing about it as well, which is that they know that they can get away with it, and they know that on a certain level, there are white people, I know, shocking in London, on that tube carriage that they're on right there. And they will know that on a certain level, whether or not these people say that they are, completely in favor of all of the current thing, it makes them uncomfortable because there comes to a certain point when you recognize a tipping point in ethnic representation in your street, in your city, where your brain, consciously or not, will recognize, hold up, I'm in the minority in here. I'm in danger here, because you will recognize one way or not, other peoples do not have the same behavioral standards. They do not have the same standards of, shall we say, a fair fight.
Well, I went through that process.
Whereas British people, generally speaking, in the Tucker Carlson way, the Anglo-Saxon fighting standards tends to be you take a man one-on-one in honourable combat. Foreign people have no aversion to ganging up on other people. So you know that there is a certain aspect of this where they're taking a pleasure in cheering along this, because they see it as a
display of dominance.
It's a display of dominance. It's an aggression against the native white population. Whether people want to say that you're reading too much into it, Harry, that's racist of you to think, Harry. That's the fact of it. That's the honest truth.
It isn't reading too much into it. This image here shows basically in our central capital, if you say something objectionable, if someone says something objectionable and you want to stand up against it based on British values, you will be outnumbered. So this is a visual demonstration of what census data have been telling us for ages, and the violence that will come as a consequence is going to be inevitable.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just going to say, I went through this a few years ago. I started off living in very central London and eventually sort of kept on moving further and further out, trying to find somewhere sensible. I'll just put it like that, and eventually realised there is nowhere. So even if you're moving out to, the end of the tube line, you can't get there. You basically have to give up and leave.
There are some very expensive and gated communities within London that still have somewhat
I know
representative
people who live in
population
those.
of the natives, but they're ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, but I know people who live in those. What do they do when they want to buy a pint of milk? They end up leaving these gated communities and ending up absolutely surrounded. And I won't go into it now because we haven't got time, but I can give you some examples of these people who live in these gated communities who suddenly found themselves absolutely surrounded by what should we call them, urban or scholarly gangs.
Well, all you need to do is go onto the ukdrill.com website to find a map that they give you of the territories of these scholarly gangs, which the Met Police are more than well aware of. These people write songs about these scholarly activities they get up to, and the Met do nothing.
Well, let's speak about the Met Police, actually. And I'm speaking, funnily enough, as one of those people that lives on the fringes of London, because I live on the Kent side of it, where we don't have a tube line. And even then, you can start to see the diversity and enrichment creeping in. So
yeah, that's more or less where I ended up.
Lord knows where I'll end up eventually. So the police did show up to monitor the march, and they got chased off by a bunch of teenagers shouting. Yeah, because they weren't willing to step in. Because fundamentally, are concerned.
There's enough of them to right. If that was a COVID protest,
yes,
with that many guys, they would be running in with batons and they'd be having a whale of a time.
Specifically, the Muslim woman that supported terrorism and said kuffars are drinking out of my cup would have been hitting them with batons. So this is why the police fundamentally they either disagree with it, and there are elements within the police that endorse the message of the protest, which we know because they have been waving the flags. They dropped the English language requirement in some places, so they are just trying to conscript various foreign nationals that agree with the ideology, or they're so petrified with diversity, inclusion, and equity indoctrination that they're worried about being perceived as racist if they step in, even when abuse and actual objects are being hurled at them. And they not only that, there were people breaking the law here. This fella decided to ascend the scaffolding. This is right near Tottenham Court Road, actually. I was there last night. And it's public street. He decides to climb up the scaffolding, a private building, comes down, the police holding his flag for him, just give it back. And just say, oh, naughty boy, don't do that again.
Can I speak for a moment on the subject of the escape attempts that you, for instance, Dan, and some of your friends are trying to make of these particular areas of London, which are becoming an ethnic deluge of mixed and multi-cultures who, it turns out, don't always get along with one another.
Exhibit similar antisocial behavior.
This is one of the reasons that, while I understand the utility to a certain extent of, say, building more houses for the purposes of property prices in the UK, I am very against the idea because populations like this, when they come to our countries, they congregate in the large urban zones. And the more you destroy the green areas of Britain and you take the small rural areas and you continually urbanize them and urbanize them and urbanize them, at first, yes, you will find that they will be places where the exodus of people coming from towns and cities like London will be going to. But what you're creating is more and more nexus points for these kinds of populations to spring up in the few parts of Britain which are still relatively untouched by it.
Well, I'm in favour of both deportations and building a few more houses.
Yeah,
but I mean, there are plenty of things that you could do.
I'm saying with the way that the country is at the moment, and with the potential of who knows, 1 million plus Palestinian refugees coming in.
God, if we do that would be ridiculous. But I mean, there are some fairly low effort things that aren't going to be too triggering for the soft liberal establishment. For example, that you could apply animal butchering laws uniformly, which is basically to say outlaw halal meat. Yeah, you could do that. A couple of changes to the welfare system. That don't incentivize you bringing people in. There was a few things that you could do that would turn that mass influx into a trickle or possibly an outflow.
One of the things you have to learn is they don't want to. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying to the audience at home, those who maybe stumbled across this channel, haven't seen our segments before, the police are there. in numbers, in force. They
to
knew it was going to
protect
happen.
these people.
Yeah.
That's what they're
Not to
actually
protect
there
you
for.
from them. They endorse both the message and the means of the protest. And so they are applying the law intentionally, unequally, to get their desired result of keeping you afraid and unable to mount an opposition to the deluge of diversity changing the demographics and the culture of your communities.
Well, ultimately, the police exist to make sure that you pay up your taxes to the state. And if the state feels that it can get more tax revenue by importing people, then they will support that as well.
Even if said of imported populations decide to just openly attack and fight with the police. Again, there's 5 minutes of this where they're just lobbing objects at them, punching them, surrounding them.
Was there a report of how many of these people were arrested?
10.
And again,
10 of 100,000, by the way.
You compare that to the lockdown protests, which I try to go on as many of them as I can. The lockdown protests were uniformly peaceful and well mannered.
Yeah,
and we got attacked by the police repeatedly, and they didn't hold back in the slightest. And yet here we are with a bunch of group attacking them, and they get the kid gloves.
Yeah, well,
disgusting.
TP UK again. 5 police were injured. Only 10 arrests total. The Met Police decided to comment on this. They said, as you can see, the numbers in Whitehall have reduced dramatically towards the end of the day. We thank everyone for their cooperation. Only made 1 arrest in relation to an incident last week. That was the prior one as well. Oh, 1 arrest. Oh, how victorious. Only 1 arrest.
That was a choice.
Yes, because we can see all the criminal behavior on display on video. So you making 1 arrest isn't a victory, isn't demonstration of low criminality and an orderly protest. It's demonstration that you tacitly agree with the message and the means of conducting the protest. And again, they were disrespecting the cenotaph, the war memorial that allows this country, the men that fought for it, that allows the country to exist, the thing that honors them. They decided to, earlier, they set up a massive Palestinian stand right by it, right next to Downing Street. It's just displays of relentless colonialism. But all right, who was arrested? This is something interesting that happened. Who was arrested at the weekend's protest? This man shouting racist abuse in Whitehall. He was the only one, apparently, right? Tonight he's in custody, arrested on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. Now, of course, I know suspicion is the term used until you're prosecuted. But what was he saying? That's quite interesting. Let's
it must have been pretty extreme if he was the only one.
May Allah's curses be on the infidels. May Allah's curses be on the Jews. Right. Okay. I think that's cut and dry a little bit, maybe, but I don't think he was the only one. Excuse me for not thinking that everyone involved was peaceful, prosperous, and multicultural.
They can graffiti Nelson's column. They can protest around the cenotaph. They can have a mass rally and protest and prayer outside of Downing Street. Nothing happens until they start to assault the police officers, and even then, only 10 of them. Oh, but the second that one of them starts to insult our precious, precious Jewish community, that's when we have to take action.
This is something that Matt Walsh raised with Nikki Haley. So Nikki Haley complained, given that she's the war hawk on the presidential campaign at the moment, that all universities that support BDS or Hamas at this time, like Harvard, where I think it was 30 student organizations signed a letter in support of the Palestinians, should be defunded. And Matt Walsh went, where were you for the last 30-odd years when they had anti-white racism on campus? Should that be defunded as well?
Question.
It is only capable of the defense being mounted when you are playing within the intersectional framework of oppressed classes being assaulted.
Yeah, just on that, Harvard have lost huge amounts of private donations in the last couple of weeks. It hasn't happened to your point, it hasn't happened in the previous years when they've been advocating the other things they've been advocating against other groups, for example, white men, for example. None of that got them, none of that lost them a penny.
It was only when all of a sudden everybody realized, oh my God, Harvard's discriminating against the Asians. Oh, well, now they've gone a step too far for me. They can discriminate against white people all they like, but not my precious Asians. And that might be something that you support, though, Dan.
More Asians for Dan.
More Asians for Dan.
Only the women.
You draw a line.
If I might say something slightly contentious as well, that I'm sure will be clipped out of context, but it's because our enemies like to smear us. We've heard endlessly for the last few years about white nationalism being on the rise and Charlottesville and anti-Jewish conspiracy theories and the like. How much fuel do you think it gives to the fire of said anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists if all of a sudden we only care about ethnic tensions, mass immigration, and racial hatred on university campuses when it targets Jews? Because it looks like the power structures only care about Jewish interests rather than a broad brush commitment to the principle of anti-discrimination and non-violence. Again, as you said earlier, I'm not interested in ethnic conflict. I just think apply the law equally, but this is the outcome that you're going to get.
Well, you can't.
Very careful with the fire you're playing with.
You can't apply the law equally because then you'll get unequal outcomes, and they can only be explained by racism. Like when Dan was saying, here's a few simple things that we could do to stop the inflow and turn it into an outflow. One of the other things that you could do, and I know this hurts some of my instincts and some of your instincts, and certainly it hurts some of Josh's instincts, but we have some quite stringent business regulations within this country. Now, those business regulations are not applied evenly depending on the ethnicity of the person who owns the business. If we were to begin to apply and enforce those evenly, you would find that your local row of 12 Turkish barbers in a row would quickly thin out. And the people there who are employing all of their cousins would probably decide it's more profitable to return home.
Well, speaking of applying the law equally, let's look at one rally that was also had and whether or not you think this constitutes a call for violence. So there was a fella here. This is the Met Police responding to a clip. Just scroll up slightly. There it is. Stop, please. Right. Okay. What's the solution to liberate people from the concentration camp called Palestine? Jihad. This is from the Hib ut Tahrir demonstration. Now, if you're not familiar with that organization, they're a proscribed terrorist organization in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Germany, China, not the UK though, funnily enough. And to read a little bit from their Wikipedia page, quote, once established, the caliphate will expand into non-Muslim areas through immigration, and through military jihad so as to expand the land of Islam and diminish the land of unbelief. Now, obviously, you're thinking, what far-right website was that pulled from? Their own documents. You can go and check them in the footnotes of the Wikipedia page. So they're openly declaring war. They say Muslim armies on their placards and their banners there, and the Met Police decide to go, nah, it's all right with us, Gov. The word jihad has a number of meanings, but we know the public will commonly associate it with terrorism. Noted Muslim scholars in the Met Police. We have specialist counter-terrorism officers here in the operations room with particular knowledge in this area. They have assessed the video filmed at his Ut Tahrir protest in central London today and have not identified any offences arising from the specific clip. However, recognising the way language like this will be interpreted by the public and the divisive impact it will have, officers have identified the man involved and will be speaking to him shortly to discourage any repeat of similar chanting.
Let me just bring back that point that you made at the beginning of, we are now arresting people who stand there on a street corner and pray silence.
Yes.
So they are sufficient biblical scholars, but they can work out that somebody needs to be arrested because of what they're saying inside their own head on a street corner. But this guy standing next to an Islamic army banner, putting out a chant which I can only presume is in favour of these terrorist attacks, that isn't.
Yes.
Well, it's similar to
how screwed up is this country?
Well, it's similar to how, for instance, the ANC singing "Kill the Boer" was purely metaphorical.
Yes. This is essentially Theresa May quoting her favourite Quranic verses.
But I bet if Tommy went out on the street and said and basically copied that speech word for word, but just changed the context to be,
this is what they were saying.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be banned.
He would be arrested and jailed.
Yeah, John sent me this little video that he decided to tweet out from said organisation where some of the speakers at the protest were also speaking at their Britain conference. Again, proscribed terrorist organisation allowed to have an annual conference in Britain. The reason is the power structures agree with it.
Hang on. I do actually agree with that bit, though.
I was going to say, I agree with the sentiment of what he's saying. It's just a shame you're only allowed to say such things in the UK unless you're a member of the more dissident faction of the Tory party.
So for those listening, for those listening, he's basically ranting about the UK will no longer be able to pump its liberal filth with LGBT filth and its feminist filth into the Muslim
and presumably use NGOs to funnel money.
Yeah, so I actually agree with that.
Yeah, sure, but that's only because he's going to reverse engineer the sewage pipe to allow all the turds from the Muslim world to flow straight into the UK.
Well, yes.
Rather than turn off and destroy the pipe itself, which I'd much prefer to do so. But who are the police policing? Well, there was a gentleman who brought an English flag to the demonstration, and he just said, if I get any hint of racism, there will be people be arrested. So you can carry flags akin to the ISIS flag. I saw Callum did a tweet a little while ago.
Chanting "Kill the Jews."
Analyze, curse upon the Jews. We need a global jihad. All of those things are just peaceful and scholarly.
The curse upon the Jews part is maybe the one bit of the overstepping the line that might get you in trouble. But if you say anything else, you're fine.
Yeah. You've got to think, okay, what's going on here? The police have been trained. So that's some young copper who's been through all his police training. All his police training is about the worst thing that you can do is racism.
Yep.
Global jihad is a bit of a no-no, but we can overlook it. It's kind of akin to stealing a grape from greengrocers.
Well, you don't want to be racist, do you?
But racism is the highest crime. And that is all of the programming that this young officer has been received since day one of signing up.
You are being institutionally gaslit, because if you observe the fact that the word jihad is synonymous with Muslim violence from an organization that deliberately says we're going to use military action to subvert the UK and make it part of the global Muslim caliphate, if you observe that is their intention because they say the bloody thing on camera, then you will be gaslit into saying, actually, it's an internal struggle and it just means they're grappling with themselves, bro. Never mind, this is in direct response to an actual war going on. And if you notice anything different, you're the racist. Again, it's just disarm you against putting up a fight against the cultural and demographic change.
Yeah, very well said. That is all of this. It is a process of disarming us against what's happening.
And here's the perfect example of that, just to basically finish up on. The pub right down from Trafalgar Square, there are a couple of lads that had the England flag in there. Now, again, I don't know exactly what group they came from. This is not stated in any of the videos, etc. Big Baz walking through the door there to Stone Cold Steve Austin's music, I presume. But the police are just standing outside. They're not preventing the mob of banner-clavered youths, part of the protest, that obviously have the intent to besiege the pub and attack the occupants. No arrests happening there when they're standing outside demonstrating their intent to attack. And it's because they are mandated to stand between them. But frankly, it's hard not to suggest that they wouldn't rather be out of the way and allow the chips fall where they may.
Well, I reckon it's probably necessary because Baz could take all that lot.
Oh yeah.
Let's be honest.
It's like Gandalf the Uruk-hai.
I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me, lads. That would be that situation because you just know that there's probably a row of 4 or 5 extra Bazes. And that's like that's like, how do you quantify infinity?
A phalanx of Bazes, yes.
Final one to mention, this is something that you forwarded to me, just in case you weren't convinced that your power establishment hates you. One of the Hamas leaders got a council house recently. He's been here since 1990s. This is fugitive Mohammed Qasim Sawalha, and he fled to the UK in the 1990s and bought a council house and got a £112,000 discount on top of it.
This is why you can't afford property in London, because as well as housing a lot of Somalis for free in London, they're also giving council housing to actual fugitives in your capital city.
Well, let's not be unfair to Nima Parvini's lookalike. Let's read his CV.
I was going to say Jihadi Q from Star Trek, but yeah, it could be that.
Yeah. So he when he arrived in the UK, of course he didn't cut all ties. Oops. He continued to work for Hamas, holding secret talks about revitalizing terrorist acts in Israel and helping to launder money to support activities in Gaza and the West Bank, according to a US Department of Justice indictment in 2004. So we've known about him in 2004. Again, gets a council house. Recently, as 2019, he took part in the official Hamas delegation to Moscow, where he met Vladimir Putin's deputy foreign minister, served on Hamas's Politburo between 2013 and 2017. He was pictured with Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, in 2010 and 2012. He later became director of Finsbury Park Mosques, where he took over after Egyptian Islamist Abu Hamza, hook-handed man. So, obvious moderate, great representative of the community. I'm so glad we've imported all of these people in here that want to destroy our country, and I'm really happy that some Middle Eastern ethnic religious conflict is happening in my home city. Thanks very much, government.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplations series, this episode on the paradox of tolerance. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.